What is up, fellow nerds, and welcome back to the Dapper Snapper Gaming channel, and welcome back to How Do I Want to Do This? This is our series where we take a look at all playable options available to players in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, then we rank them on a scale of 1 to 10 and either build them or fix them depending on how they rank. Now today we finish up our talks on the Wild Magic Sorcerer, the most chaotic and crazy of all subclasses in Dungeons & Dragons, but yet it still got a pretty decent ranking when we talked about it this week, and so now we get to build one. But before we do that, make sure to leave a like on the video and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, make sure to share the video with your friends, and of course, click the bell so you're notified when new videos are uploaded. The best way to support this channel, of course, is by becoming a member. By clicking that join button down below, you can become a bronze snapper, which is just at the bottom level, and you can actually get access to all of my build guides and all of my subclass fix guides as well for you to use at your table. And of course, you could also use them as NPCs. You can use them however you want. It's just a nice way for me to be able to give back as you all support my channel and really help me in doing what it is that I do. Of course, you could go up to some higher tiers. There's of course the silver snapper level, of course, and you get the videos 24 hours early, which is a nice perk and a special shout out. And finally, the gold tier, which is still in development a little bit, but you do get access to a special part of my Discord server and help me in picking certain things for content. And there are more things going to be added to that in the future. But of course, for all of you watching, thank you for being here. So like I said, this subclass, while there is a lot of randomness, does have a lot of really good things that are going for it. Namely the fact that we have the Tides of Chaos feature, and this is what gives us advantage on a lot of things that can lead to us being pretty effective. Now, I will lead with a disclaimer on this video, and honestly on this subclass, to be honest with you. This subclass and build are very much dependent on you having a DM that is all in on the chaos. If your DM does not like the chaos and does not like rolling on the Wild Magic Surge table, do not play this build. This is a build that is going to be rolling on the Wild Magic Surge table a lot, and it's got to be a table that loves the chaos. If you're a table that's playing super serious, or your DM thinks that it's going to derail the campaign for whatever reason, it's fine. Play this at a different game. But I just want you to talk to your DM before you play something like this, because this could end up making somebody frustrated and you don't want to be the cause of that. So do this first, ask first, don't wait till later when it could cause frustration. But yeah, we're going to be rolling on the Wild Magic Surge table a lot, and you need to have that understanding with your dungeon master, and we will of course get into that in just a second. But with that disclaimer out of the way, let's go ahead and start the build. So of course, here are the rules for this series. We are not going to be taking anywhere near that 11 levels. We're going to be taking way more than that on this build as we go to level 20. And of course, going with the standard way that we do stats. But of course, if your table does it different, then you will just need to adjust accordingly, going highest to lowest. So let's jump in, starting with our race. I'm taking a race that I've taken several times before, and honestly, it's, to me anyway, one of the best mechanical ones out there, not counting your variant humans and your custom lineages and all that kind of stuff. We're going with the half-elf this week. The half-elf makes a lot of sense here because, if you can't tell, we're going to be gaining advantage on a lot of things due to that Tides of Chaos feature, which we're going to be trying to take full advantage of when we do this build. So definitely again, we're wanting to really hone in on gaining advantage on things, and so I think you can kind of tell where this is going. But having the half-elf kind of gives us the best of both worlds between the human and the elven features, and so I think it really helps round us out in that way. Number one, we get to choose a sub-race on the elven side, and we're going to go ahead and go for the high elf here. The high elf is going to give us actually one of two choices, and we're going to go with the free cantrip. We want to be able to save as many cantrips as we can just because we need the versatility as we go, and so grabbing Booming Blade here is really nice. We are forced into intelligence being the stat that this is based on, but what's great is that Booming Blade doesn't really care what stat you have because it's based on an attack roll, and it just goes by whatever attack roll you are using on your character, which is great. So the intelligence doesn't matter. at all, so who cares? Then going on from that, we of course get the mainstays of the Elven race, which are things like Trance, Fey Ancestry, Dark Vision, that kind of thing. So again, it's really, really great. Then on the human side, we get the stat boosts, which is great. We get a +2 and then 2 +1s. In this case, we're gonna follow what the book normally would do, but again, post Tasha's, you can put these stats anywhere that you want. Talk to your DM, of course, but post Tasha's, it does technically allow any race to put the stat boosts onto any stats. So again, talk to your DM. For us, again, our highest stat is going to go into Charisma. Second highest is going to go Constitution. Our third is going to go into Strength. Just make sure that you end up with a 13 here at least. We're going to need that for multi-classing purposes going forward. Then I'll probably throw Wisdom as the next one, Dexterity, and then we're going to dump Intelligence, of course. Wisdom and Dexterity are interchangeable. I like having a decent Wisdom just because Wisdom saving throws are a thing that are going to come up a decent amount, but so are Dexterity. And so it's really just a matter of preference on what you think here. Dexterity also, of course, is initiative, and there's a lot of other things that come with that. So definitely consider swapping those around. I can see one or the other being a little bit better there. For our boosts, of course, no brainer here. We're just going to put our +2 into Charisma, the +1s into the other odd stats. So that just kind of shores all of that up. And then we will, of course, cap off that Charisma a little bit later. For our equipment, I'm going to grab a bunch of things that I can't use yet. I'm not going to be proficient in any of these items that I want just yet, but we will gain proficiency very, very soon. So just hang tight, it's fine. So we're going to grab a longsword, we're going to grab medium armor, and we're going to grab a shield optionally. If you want a shield, great. If you don't want it, no problem. You don't have to have it. But basically, longsword and the best medium armor that you can get. This, of course, does make the case for making dexterity a little bit higher, seeing how we are going to be using armor that does get boosted by our dexterity score. So definitely could see that being a thing, but that is completely optional. And so, yeah, we're going to be taking a bunch of equipment, but we can't use any of it yet because we're not proficient. So don't try to use it, just use cantrips for now to get you to level 2, and then we'll be fine once we hit level 2. So let's get through level 1 first. At level 1, we're starting Sorcerer, and really the only reason I'm starting Sorcerer is because I want the Constitution saving throw proficiency. That is a very important thing about starting Sorcerer, is that we are going to have proficiency with those Constitution saving throws, which is going to help our concentration. It's a big deal being able to concentrate on spells and not drop them. We have a pretty good Constitution score actually, and so having proficiency is going to boost that even more, which makes it really reliable that we're not going to drop concentration unless we take a really, really big hit. So we get our spellcasting, of course, right off the bat, and Wild Magic Surge as well as Tides of Chaos right off the bat. Again, if you have not watched my video from earlier this week going over this subclass, that is where I was going into detail on what each feature does, so make sure to check that out. That's up in the iCard above for you to look at. But so for spell casting, we of course are going to get things like Prestidigitation, Mind Sliver, Message, just kind of take the basics here, nothing crazy fancy that we're really worried about. You may want to take an offensive option here as well. That would definitely help out because we're really not doing a whole lot of damage. Again, we can't really use the Booming Blade because we're not proficient with the weapon yet, so definitely grab something that deals damage here, and again, we will buff this up a lot once we get to level 2, but for level 1 we're gonna not be the best character for sure. For first level spells, there are 3 that are must brings here. Number 1, Absorb Elements. Number 2, Shield. Number 3, Silvery Barbs. So what do all 3 of these have in common? They're all reaction spells. What this is for is the Tides of Chaos feature being dependent on us casting first level or higher spells on the Sorcerer list. All 3 of these would qualify. This gives us 3 different situations where we can possibly recharge that feature if we have already used it, and that is the big advantage here. Again, you want your DM to have that buy-in so that you are having these surges in order to get this feature back. That's the biggest thing, is making sure this feature is online as much as possible. Yes, it does cost a spell slot, but honestly now you're getting even more bang for your buck with your spell slots because you're getting back your Tides of Chaos feature, albeit at the cost of rolling on the Wild Magic Surge table. But again, like we said back earlier this week, the Wild Magic Surge table is generally either good or neutral. About 65 to 70% of what is on that list is either good or neutral, which is totally fine with me. I would rather that happen than something bad happen. But of course, that's going to happen as well. There's always the chance of fireballing yourself. And when that happens, it's a bad day. It's a really, really bad day, but it's fine. You know, it really is okay, because by and large, we're going to get something that is either beneficial or doesn't really matter. Then at level 2, we are going to go ahead and take a turn. And so we bought this longsword somewhere. We don't really know how to use it. We don't really care all that much about it. And then all of a sudden, we now have this crazy connection to it. That's right. I've gone this whole Sorcerer series without doing the classic Sorlock, Paladin, blah, blah, blah build. And honestly, I would rather have not done it on any of the others, but this one. This one makes the most sense to me to have the crazy multi-classing, so you better believe that's what we're doing this week. So we're going with Warlock for level 2. And yes, we're going Hexblade. Hexblade, of course, is one of the best, if not the best, subclasses for the Warlock. Genie is up there again, but we'll be talking about that very soon on the channel, actually. But it gives us a lot of really, really awesome features, namely the fact that we get Hexblade's Curse and Hex Warrior. Through these, we can actually lay a curse on our enemies, which is great. It makes it easier for us to crit, which is going to be great, especially if we're rolling with advantage a lot. And of course, we're going to be making that even better going forward. I think you know where we're going with that. That's coming in a few levels, but either way, this is still going to be very, very helpful to us. This also is what gives us proficiency with medium armor, shields, and martial weapons. So now all of the equipment that we took earlier now comes online for us, and we can now use it. So our AC is pretty good, our longsword is online, and we can have a shield if we want to. Booming Blade now works because we can use charisma to attack instead of our strength, which is even better. So we don't really have to worry about strength being any higher. We have to have the strength at a 13 for one other reason we'll see here in just a second, but we're not using it for really anything except to make sure our armor doesn't fall off, I guess, but that's about it. We do also get Pact Magic here, which is going to give us access to some spells. Again, I haven't really talked about it as much on the channel. We will be very soon though, talking about the Pact Magic, in that we get some spell slots, and by slots I mean one spell slot for now, and we will get more, and they will get higher level as you take more Warlock levels. I'll just tell you, we're not going past this first level in Warlock just because the 1 level dip is plenty for me, but it is really, really cool how this works, because they come back on a short rest rather than a long rest, but you get very few at a specific level. So basically we're just gonna have one first level spell slot, and that's all we're gonna have for this build, but it would get better if we went further. We're gonna get cantrips like Eldritch Blast, and that's going to be our reliable cantrip that I was talking about. I wanted something that can deal damage at a distance, so that we're not having to rely necessarily fully on the melee stuff. It gives us a really, really reliable option at a distance, which is great. Besides that, pick your favorites. It really isn't nearly as important on the cantrip side. For first level spells, I would take things like Hex, of course, which is great. Hellish Rebuke is one to consider. Now keep in mind that this is not a sorcerer spell, so it would not fire Tides of Chaos. So just be careful with that. It does specifically have to be a sorcerer spell. So unfortunately, if this fired off as a reaction, it's not going to be able to fire off a surge and blah, blah, blah. So just be careful with that. But having another way to deal damage to somebody who is in melee with us can be really nice. Of course, Armor of Agathis comes on pretty much as an honorable mention here as well. And so that's pretty much it for the second level. Again, we're pretty heavy in each of these levels just because when you get to first level of something, it's pretty bulky. And so why not do it one more time? 3 levels, 3 different classes. Paladin for level 3. We are going with Paladin here because we are building up to something that I'm sure you all know exactly what we're doing, but it's totally fine. Paladin 1, we get Divine Sense and Lay on Hands, which is really cool. And you might be saying, well, Dapper, Paladins get access to heavy armor right off the bat, so don't you get proficiency with heavy armor by going into Paladin? No, it doesn't work like that. I wish it did, but it does not work like that. You need to read the multi-classing section of the player's handbook. It does not just match what the class gets. So no, we do not have heavy armor proficiency just by going into Paladin. We actually would still have to take a feat or something, or have started in Paladin in order to get that. So unfortunately, we do not have proficiency in heavy armor, so we're just going to stick with medium for now. We get Divine Sense, which helps us to get a good feel for what's going on around us. If you have any questions about anything that goes on with the Paladin kit, of course, that'll be up in the iCard above as well, where I go through all of this in great detail, as well as Lay on Hands, which is normally a nice little healing feature where we're not going to be taking that many levels in Paladin. I would focus mainly on just getting people up who are at 0. Just pump 1 HP into them and you get them back up for free, which is really nice. And you're going to eventually have more of these, but you have 5 for now. And to me, that's the best use of that you can possibly use it for. Then Paladin 2. We do have to go 2 levels into Paladin here in order to get the full use, unfortunately or fortunately. We'll see how that goes. But for our fighting style to start off, I'm going to go with dueling. There are a couple others that make sense here. Of course, you have defense, which gives you an extra boost in your AC. You have a few others that are nice. But to me, I'm just going to go with dueling just to deal some extra damage on my weapon attack, which is great. We also get spellcasting, which we'll come back to, as well as Divine Smite, which is the big one. We can now blow our spell slots in order to deal extra damage. And honestly, this is what we're going to be using our spell slots on for a good amount of things. If it's not using it for a reaction for the first level spell slots, then we're going to be using them to blow Divine Smites. And that is really the main gist of this build. So we're going to be dealing some big damage and it's going to be a lot of fun. For first level spells, Bless is really the big one here. That's going to be our concentration spell. Pretty much the entire build. I don't really think there's a whole lot of a better option that's out there. Bless is just super solid, so I would take that and call it a day, really, honestly. Cure Wounds is also fine if you wanted to go that route, just to have a nice little support option in the back if you need it. But yeah, besides that, that's really all that I need, so pick your favorites beyond that. Okay, now we're going back to Sorcerer, and we're going to stay there the rest of the way. We needed to take that little diversion just to build up our core here, but now we're done, and we go back to Sorcerer, and we're going to really build this thing out as a Wild Magic Sorcerer, and it's going to be a lot of fun. So, as Sorcerer 2, we finally get Font of Magic, which gives us our sorcery points, which is cool because we actually can do some like coffee luck shenanigans, which I don't recommend you do, but you can of course convert your spell slot over to being a normal spell slot and then get it back on a short rest. It's not going to be that effective just with how sleep and rest and all that stuff works, so don't worry about it, especially with only 1 first level spell slot. It's definitely not worth going crazy about there. But now as Sorcerer 3, we get access to our meta magic options, which is great. I'm going to grab Quickened Spell, which is a really big deal, honestly, and Subtle Spell, just because I know a lot of people like Subtle Spell, although I'm a little bit of a Subtle Spell hater, maybe. I understand that there is a lot of utility with it, and I think that in this case, it makes a little bit more sense. So that's what we're going to do. Quicken Spell is really nice, especially on characters that have access to things like Eldritch Blast and Hold Person, which we're going to be getting at this level, because then you can quicken those spells and then still have your action to cast a cantrip. So you can quicken Eldritch Blast, which means you can do 2 Eldritch Blasts in 1 turn, which is great because then the second spell is a cantrip, so that qualifies. Or you can quicken something like Hold Person and then cast something like Booming Blade because that is a cantrip. So that all works in the rules. So definitely consider doing things like that, and that's going to lead to massive amounts of damage. And that's something that I would definitely consider doing. So we'll get to that here in just a second. But yeah, that's really the main part of Quickened. If you don't take anything else, take Quickened here. You won't regret it. As for second level spells, of course, Hold Person, like I said, and Misty Step is another option. There aren't really any good reaction spells that I'm worried about at this level, so don't focus on it. But again, if you Misty Step away and you didn't use a reaction, then you may get back your advantage, which is really, really good. And that's going to only get better as Sorcerer 4 when we're taking, you guessed it, Elven Accuracy. Elven Accuracy is amazing because we can now focus in on Charisma, which we are using as our modifier for attacking. So this means that we now not only get a +1 to Charisma, so that helps to get us up to a 20 in our case. For you, it might be a little lower, but it just depends on your table. But also now, whenever we have advantage on a Charisma-based thing, including attack rolls, we now get to roll an additional D20. We have 3 D20s that we're rolling here. And if we're using Hexblade's Curse, we crit on a 19 or 20. Our chances here are insane of getting a crit, and that's wild. And that's not even with having to do hold person shenanigans. So that's really, really cool. I really like those odds. Personally, I think that's great. Moving on, at Sorcerer 5, we get Magical Guidance, which is, it's fine. I'm not the biggest fan of Magical Guidance, but it's okay. It's kind of like a Guidance light, sort of. Whatever. Then we also get 3rd level spells. Counterspell is the only other reaction spell that I think is necessary, because again, that's a really great use of when it's not our turn, we get back that Tides of Chaos feature, and that's gonna feel really good. I would also consider Haste here. Haste will be a nice option for a concentration spell as well, but for the most part, I would focus on things like Bless if we're not doing something like Hold Person at the time. At Sorcerer 6, we finally get Bend Luck, which is pretty cool. Again, this is kind of like a Bless feature, sort of, but it's not bad. I like it. It's a little expensive, but it's not too bad. It's more of a reactionary type of thing where something like Guidance has to be preemptive. This is more reactionary, so that's why the cost comes there, and it's fine. Honestly, I don't think it's that bad. At Sorcerer 7, we get no features, but we do get 4th level spells. I'll take something like Dominate Beast, Polymorph, and the big one, Greater Invisibility. This is another way of gaining advantage, which is really cool as long as somebody can't see invisible creatures for some reason. But either way, really, really good option there. At Sorcerer 8, we get another ASI or feat, and there are really 2 options that you could go with here. I'm going to be taking both of them, so whatever is obvious in your head, if I don't say it here, I'll probably be taking it later, so don't worry about it too much. But here I'm going to take Eldritch Adept, and I'm going to be taking Agonizing Blast. What's nice is that because we do have that 1st level in Warlock, we go ahead and qualify for this, which is cool, even though we didn't take the 2nd level in Warlock where we normally would be getting the invocations normally. This goes ahead and gives it to us as we are continuing our journey in Sorcerer, which is great. So I think it's cool. We basically got the 2nd level of Warlock, or at least part of it, while still advancing our Sorcerer timeline, which is pretty cool. I think that's great. And then as Sorcerer 9, we don't get any features, but we do get 5th level spells. I'll take Hold Monster and Dominate Person. Again, those are really the biggest ones that you can take here, and you can possibly quicken them and go from there. As Sorcerer 10, we get another meta magic option. I would take Twinned Spell here. Now, Twinned is interesting because if you're playing using the description of Booming Blade prior to Tasha's, then you can twin Booming Blade to basically hit 2 targets as long as they're both in range. However, if you're playing post Tasha's, I would argue that you can no longer do that. Let me know in the comments down below. This has been a topic of discussion in how they did this in order to restrict the polearms from being able to use Booming Blade, but can you twin Booming Blade? I'm going to say the answer is no post Tasha's, but yes prior to Tasha's. So really depends on what your table is going by in that way. So I'm going to assume we cannot do that, but what we can twin is Hold Person, and that is something we absolutely will take advantage of at some point during this build. For Sorcerer 11, we get no features, but 6th level spells come online. Mass Suggestion is really the only one I'm concerned about. There are a couple others that are maybes, but that's the only one I'm focused on. I would really beef up my lower level spells and just focus on upcasting them, and that's honestly all that I care to do for this build. For Sorcerer 12, we're going to grab Warcaster. Yes, that was the obvious one from earlier. It makes a lot of sense to grab something like this. It allows us to cast Booming Blade as somebody tries to run away, which is good. Gives us advantage on those concentration checks on top of the proficiency, so we're not going to be failing those concentration checks hardly at all, which is great. So yeah, definitely a great one to pick up there. Sorcerer 13, we get no features, but we get 7th level spells. There aren't any in particular that I'm really all that excited about, to be honest with you. All of the reaction spells stopped showing up a long time ago, so it's just really whatever fits with the nature of your character at this point, and just go from there. At Sorcerer 14, we get Controlled Chaos, which is a huge buff to our Wild Magic Surges. We now roll twice and pick whichever one we want, which is great. Takes a lot of the randomness, I mean, some of the randomness out of the table, which is really, really cool. Essentially taking your possibilities of 1 out of 50 to 2 out of 50, or 1 out of 25, which is cool, which again increases our odds of hitting something either good or neutral. Then at Sorcerer 15, we get no features, but we get 8th level spells. Dominate Monster and Power Word Stun make a lot of sense for me here. Again, Power Word Stun, similar in function to the Hold Person. I might prefer Hold Person over Power Word Stun, honestly, but obviously it definitely has its merits, and it's an 8th level spell. So what else are you using your 8th level spell slot on? To be honest. Sorcerer 16, we get another ASI or feat. I'm going to throw the tough feat on here just because we can always use the extra HP on a mainly sorcerer build. And finally, level 20, Sorcerer 17, we get another meta magic feature. Pick your favorite. Honestly, there's not one that really stands out to me that is crucial here at level 20, but what does stand out is 9th level spells, things like Mass Polymorph, Power Word Kill, and of course, Wish. So what do you think of our penultimate build for this class? I think this is a lot of fun. I think being able to use that quote-unquote randomness and chaos to our advantage is huge, and being able to turn Tides of Chaos into a very reliable way of getting advantage, which kicks into our ability to roll 3 different dice, which is great. I think that all of this works together really, really nicely, and mechanically speaking, this is a really sound build, and I'm super excited to be talking about it with you today. For our honorable mentions before we go, of course, for other racial options, I would of course take any elven race here. You've got your Shatterkais, you've got your Eladrins, or any of your other elven races or half elven races. Any of those work fine. Again, gaining advantage reliably is great here, and sorcerers a lot of times don't have that just because they don't get fairy fire, so this can help out with that a lot. So elven races love this. I also really like the idea of taking a Warforged that is malfunctioning, and that be why you're having Wild Magic Surges and you're like looking for somebody to fix you. I think that's a really, really cool way to look at this, so definitely an awesome option. And finally, I wanted to, at least for story reasons, take something like a Furbolg, something that is very much peaceful but very magical at the same time, that sometimes fireballs itself. I think is a really, really fun option, and one that is not usually easily frustrated, but yet can have a bit of a temper because of all the randomness that happens. So something else to consider for story reasons more than anything. For other feats, I think the Slasher feat makes a lot of sense here as well, being able to slow enemies down in order to keep them around you in melee, which is really nice. And the other one I would consider is either Heavily Armored or Heavy Armored Master. This, of course, either gives us proficiency with heavy armor or makes our heavy armor just a little bit better. I have taken Heavy Armor Master once before on a build, but it's been a long time ago. But Heavily Armored, of course, would improve us to heavy armor proficiency, where we were just at medium before, unless you wanted to start with Paladin. So that's another way you could do it if you wanted to go that route. And finally, for other multi-classing options, the Fighter makes the most sense to me, and honestly the Rune Knight is the best one that we could take in this case. You have that magical aspect with the runes, and of course you grow and deal extra damage with your melee stuff. You could of course go with the boring Battle Master, but I think Rune Knight makes more sense in this case, and that's really what I would rather go. And finally, the Bard, the Creation Bard makes a lot of sense as well. I think that the chaotic energy of kind of trying to create certain things and it turning into something that you don't want could be an interesting combo. And so I definitely would consider going with that. So that is our build for today. Next week, we are finishing up the Sorcerer talks with the Rune Child, and this is going to be an exciting one. I'm really excited to be able to talk about this one. I've been looking at this one ahead a little bit, and it's really fun, and I think you all are going to have a blast with it as well. But until next time, stay safe out there, stay healthy. We'll see you later. Bye-bye.